When it comes to eating a lot without gaining weight, there's two ways you could look at this. Either as enjoying things like special occasions such as holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, and things like that, or looking at it as more long-term where you can eat more food all the time without gaining weight. Don't worry, I'm going to break down how to do both in this video.
Hey, this is Colin DeWay. If you want to master your metabolism and learn how to eat more food, get in better shape, then make sure you subscribe and click on that bell notification because that's what we talk about here. Alright, since at the release of this video anyway, we are coming up on the holiday season here. At least in the US, we're coming up on Thanksgiving, we got Christmas right behind it. So let's start with the short-term thought process of being able to eat more food without getting fat. But make sure you stick around to the end of the video because on the second part of this video, I will be talking about how to eat more food all the time. And let's be honest, who doesn't want to eat more food? Now there are several strategies we can take to be able to enjoy more food during special occasions without getting fatter. And I'm going to give you 5 tips today to help. And while I am going to give you these strategies, I think the most important thing to understand is almost pretty much no matter what, you cannot make yourself fat from one day of overeating. Sure, you may gain a pound or two of fat if you really overdo it, but that's not the same as making you fat. And it takes several weeks or months of being off plan for this to happen. And this is why the all or nothing mentality is such a killer. One thing to keep in mind is that a pound of fat is roughly 3,500 calories. So technically, if you maintain your weight on say 2,000 calories, it would require you to eat 9,000 calories in one day to gain 2 pounds of fat in a single day. This is where you need to realize that fat and weight are not the same thing, because while a day of overeating may lead to several pounds up on the scale the following day, most of this is due to water weight and things like digestion and bloating, and a lot of that's going to come off within the next few days. In fact, if you're someone who weighs yourself frequently, but you find that seeing a day that's much higher than it should be on the scale really messes with you mentally, then I would really strongly suggest that after a day of overeating, you don't get back on the scale for a few days and let things settle and see where they are then. But with that out of the way, here are some strategies that you can take to be able to eat a lot of food at one time, but keep your weight relatively steady. And tip number 1 is if you know you're going to be splurging later in the day, you can use a fasting approach leading into it. By fasting in the morning, you have basically allowed yourself to not have any calories leading into the splurge, so you're ahead of the game when you get to it. Hell, some people even take an OMAD approach, which stands for 1 meal a day, and while I'm not necessarily suggesting you have to do this, although it's something you could, because if you're eating all your food at one time or in a shorter time-restricted window, it's much easier to eat a lot of the foods that you enjoy and not go way over your calories for the day. Tip number 2 is to actually save up some calories leading into that day, or even potentially taking some away after as well. By eating a little bit less than you normally would, you are able to kind of bank calories, so to speak, so that when you do overeat on that one day, your net for the week stays relatively close. Now, I definitely don't recommend starving yourself to lead up to that day, but if you take away 100 or 200 calories daily, and potentially even again afterwards, you leave a lot of room to be able to eat much more food, and you can offset some of that overage. Now, tip number 3 is something that not many people will think about, but I think can be a really big help, and that is don't eat foods that you don't actually enjoy. This is especially a big help for days like Thanksgiving and Christmas when there's kind of a lot of junk around and you're going to be doing a lot of eating. Just because food is there doesn't mean you have to eat it. In fact, why waste calories on food that you don't even enjoy when you could have more room for things that you do? In fact, if you eat the same amount of the foods that you do enjoy, but then don't eat all the junk filler stuff that you don't enjoy, you'll net less total calories while still being satisfied with what you got to eat for the day. Although I will say this, a good tip as well, kind of like a bonus tip, would be to make sure you still eat a good protein source with all your meals, because it's going to help you feel fuller. So especially like in Thanksgiving, when you got that turkey around, make sure you fill up on that, but then still enjoy the other stuff you like too. Now, tip number 4 is go ahead and eat what you want, eat until you're full, but understand the difference between being full and still wanting to eat. The part that really gets a lot of people is they continue to eat after they're full, and this kind of takes the enjoyment out of it, and the only reason you're eating is because you're off plan, but you're not even enjoying it at this point. I'm all for enjoying the day. Life is all about experiences and memories, and honestly, I really don't think very many people should really be worrying about tracking and staying on a diet during things like Christmas and anniversaries and birthdays, unless you have something really important that you need to be leaner for, like a show, and that's probably not going to be you. Absolutely enjoy what you want, eat the foods you want, don't feel guilty, but know when to stop. And tip number 5 is to do some exercise earlier in the morning before everything gets started. And this way you can put those calories to better use as you started from a net negative. I'm actually not really a big fan of doing extra cardio to kind of make up for an overage. I think that's a very slippery slope to go down. But as a one-off kind of a thing where it's planned in advance and you're not trying to react to something, and doing something like a turkey trot or even just going in for a good training session ahead of time can be very helpful. Just please don't ever use exercise as a form of punishment. That is not somewhere you want to go, and it's not a battle you're going to win. Okay, now switching over to be able to eat more food all the time without getting fat. There are definitely some strategies you can take to do this. Especially if you have a long history of dieting, chances are your metabolism has become suppressed from this, making it so you maintain your weight on lower calories than you'd like. In fact, you've probably noticed every single time you diet, it tends to get harder and harder, and this is because your body has this self-defense mechanism against starvation, and it slows your metabolism down to prevent you from losing more fat. So if you want to be able to eat more food without slapping on a bunch of weight, you need to take some time to get your metabolism back into a better place, and you do this with a process called reverse dieting. This is where you slowly increase your calories over time and allow your metabolism to pick back up and lower your body's defense. And by taking it slow, you allow the body to keep up with the changes in calories without storing a lot of extra body fat with it. For instance, if you were maintaining your weight on about 1,500 calories, well, if you just jump your calories right up to 2,000 right away, your body could not handle this and you'll be in a big surplus and store body fat pretty quickly. But if you made small changes and bumped up your calories by, say, maybe 50 and ate 1,550 calories every day for the week, and you keep making these small changes over time, eventually you get your calories up to a better place, your metabolism has improved, and now you're in a position to be able to eat more food, and you will have severely minimized the chances of gaining extra body fat by taking it slowly. In fact, on my channel under playlist, if you have not seen it, I took a client of mine who went through reverse dieting, and we actually saw that she ended up increasing her calories over 800 calories per day without gaining any weight. Now, I can't promise it'll necessarily go that well for you, but it does show that it's possible. And if your goal is to eat more food, like I'm assuming it is since you clicked on this video, this process is going to help you do that. Understand too, there's a very large difference between potentially gaining a small amount of fat and actually getting fat. They're very different things. Okay, another thing you can do to be able to eat more food and not gain fat is to increase your protein intake. I talked about this briefly in the other section of this video, but protein has a very high thermic effect of food, and it makes it really hard to store as body fat. And not only is it really hard to store as body fat, but it's also very filling, so if your goal is to just eat more volume, that's a great way to do it, and it'll help keep you from overeating on other things as well. Which, speaking of protein, you've probably heard that protein is what builds muscle, and you've probably seen that most bodybuilders eat a very high protein diet. Which is true, but another thing they do is obviously they strength train. And honestly, strength training is one of the best things you can possibly do to improve your metabolism and be able to eat more food, because the more muscle you have, the faster your metabolism will be, and not only do you increase your metabolism, but obviously you get the calorie burn from the exercise as well, and it's just a win-win. In fact, that extra food now becomes fuel for your muscles. And as much as strength training does help, and I do encourage it, if you just absolutely hate it, even still, just living some sort of active lifestyle that you enjoy will help you eat more food without getting fat, because you'll get that expenditure. Now, another thing, and while this does relate back to the reverse dieting I was talking about, a very, very important thing that you need to make sure that you're not doing is dieting all the time. You cannot diet on and off frequently and expect to be able to eat a lot of food without gaining fat. That's the very thing that makes you fat. So make sure you're spending plenty of time out of a calorie deficit, giving your time with the reverse, and you'll be able to eat piles of food and just love it. And then make sure when you do diet down the road that you properly reverse diet out to keep yourself from rapidly gaining weight. Now, one other thing about reverse dieting, there are a lot of common mistakes that a lot of people make with reverse dieting. So make sure you check out this video up here, and I'll cover some of the very common mistakes that people do make reverse dieting, so you can make sure you set yourself up for success, get your metabolism into a great place, be able to eat all the food without gaining a bunch of unnecessary weight. If you have any questions about this, please leave them in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.